Welcome back. You're watching the Headlines Today CII special broadcast on Modinomics Budget 2014. I want to welcome to this panel now Editor-in-Chief of India Today Group, Shekhar Gupta. Welcome, sir. We've also got Ajay Sriram, President CII, Chandrajit Banerjee, DG CII, Rakesh Bharti Mittal, Vice Chairman of Bharti Enterprises, Sunil Kant Munjal, JMD of Hero. We've also got Nalin Kohli, Manish Tiwari and Ashok Lari. In this part of our broadcast, we want to deal with whether in this budget, Arun Jaitley and Narendra Modi will have the courage to junk and dump the anti-growth policies that the UPA brought in. I want to start with you, Mr. Gupta, especially on land labour. The Land Acquisition Act is cited by all industrialists as one of the big disincentives to invest in India. Now that Land Acquisition Act is reality. Do you think that Nalin Kohli's party will have the courage to change that?
Nalin Kohli's party voted for it the other day.
That's true.
Right? Sort of resoundingly and overwhelmingly. So the problem in India is that everybody loves a bad law. It's only when you pass the bad law, then you start figuring out how to deal with it once you come back to power. So all the bad laws passed by this government were fully backed by the BJP. All the good laws this government tried to bring in were opposed by the BJP, including taking insurance FDI to 49%, although it was the BJP's own decision. So the problem with politicians is that they ride one tiger when they're out of power. Then they tried not just to get off it, they try to get on to mount another tiger, right? So it's a very difficult thing. Now they have to find a way out of it. I think it will be very difficult for them to go back to parliament and say we'll amend it, because then Congress party will have this 43 seats. I mean, they disappointed me by not living up to my promise of somewhere of 42. They sort of made me lose out by one, but 43 is good enough, or from the BJP's point, bad enough, because they will expose them all the time and they will play their sort of panda politics and say, but you voted for this bill just the other day, you never asked for all this. So I think the way out will be what smart governments usually resort to, which is to start tinkering with the rules that go with this law and start then loosening up some rules, changing some things and leaving some things to state governments. I do not believe that you can vote for a law and so unreservedly and within a year then start amending it, because it's too much hypocrisy. It's too much hypocrisy even in Indian politics.
That's interesting.
On labour, it's very difficult to amend any laws centrally right now, because because there is the Rajya Sabha. It's not a money bill. Second, more importantly, the BJP also has its labour wing. If you remember Arun Shoury's times, one of the big opponents, critics of Arun Shoury's disinvestment was not C2 or ITAC or left or Congress unions. It was BMS, Bharti Mazdoor Sangh.
Sure.
So for any of these changes to happen, BJP also has to evangelize the idea of reform to its own trade union wing. I would believe that there is change in the air when I see BMS issue a reformist statement. Having said that, I will say in all honesty, you have to admit that when Congress was in power, Congress's own labour union, Inter, actually sounded a lot more reformist than most of the trade unions. So Congress did a better job of convincing its unions than the BJP has done so far.
Okay. I want to ask Mr. Banerjee, given the political constraints, how likely is it that the anti-growth laws which you would like to see gone are actually scrapped by this government?
You know, I don't think anything would be scrapped. I think what would be more prudent and what we are working for, and that's what the type of response that one is getting, that one is open to changes, one is open to seeing changes. Say for instance, Companies Act that needs a lot of overhaul, but you won't see it scrapped. It has to be probably changed, tinkered around with. There is openness in understanding issues. Similarly, on the land bill, I think a land act, I think there is a lot that needs to be changed. Not only these two, there are things like DTC. Say, for instance, that we are talking about scrapping it. We need to also look at how we can rewrite quite a bit of it actually. So some of them have to be actually left to state governments to run with. Say, for instance, we'll never touch labor for I don't know how many years, and we don't want to touch it with a barge pole. But some of them needs to be also left to the states. There are best practices in the states. Even land, there are best practices in the states. So we need to give more and more to the states to see how those best practices can be actually emulated in other states to circumvent some of these.
I find the situation strange, Nalin, where the BJP first voted resoundingly in favor of the Land Acquisition Act, and now there are murmurs from within the BJP on how Rahul Gandhi's act is anti-growth in some way needs to be found, because industry is coming and telling you that they don't want to invest given how draconian the law is. Now, how is it that you vote for it in opposition and now want to change it when you're in government?
I just wanted to be certain that my facts are up to date before I really commented on it. And I was happy to note that the murmurs are from the Congress-ruled states too. It was at the meeting of Mr. Nitin Gadkari with the state revenue ministers that many Congress states also were speaking about it.
For once you'll be listening to the Congress.
No, it's not about listening to the Congress. It's about, I think we need to look at the approach. The difference is here. Mr. Modi has been constantly speaking about a Team India approach, which means involving the states. How can you not have the states on board? You can't have this center looks down at the states and orders them when you know that it's a federal structure. So in that, if you're seeing, at the end of the day, a lot of implementation is through the states too. So if you're seeing that some elements of that act are not workable, it may have been conceptualized by people of higher supreme being than those who work at the lower end of implementation of policies. So I mean, those people, if they find there's a problem there and they're suggesting improvements, how does it seem that you voted against it so you can't bring improvements? For God's sake, everything in this country has been improved, including the constitution. Anything that can bring a better form of governance or can deliver better, meet people's aspirations. And what would be served? For example, if the rules of compensation are such that projects don't come at all, what was the need? The law will be in place, there's no problem with it. So I think courage is about recognizing the problems, finding solutions.
Is that a fair enough explanation that Congress-ruled states are also complaining about the Land Acquisition Act?
Frankly,
therefore it needs to be changed.
Look, I have frankly not understood the argument at all. And the reason why I say that is that any law, takes 6 to 7 years in making. And in the case of the land acquisition law, it was initiated during UPA 1. It went through a standing committee, came back to Parliament, went to standing committee again, went to a select committee. The Congress didn't have a majority in the Rajya Sabha, and the Rajya Sabha is supposed to be the council of the states. And ultimately it went through with resounding support from the Bharatiya Janata Party. Similarly, with regard to the Competition Act, the New Companies Act. The New Companies Act was 20 years in the making. So therefore, you had a situation whereby for 20 years there was expert input day in and day out, and after an act is made, then you say the act is flawed. With the Direct Taxes Code again, the Direct Taxes Code, or the overhaul of the Income Tax Act 1961, has been in the works for 3 decades now. So therefore, either there is something fundamentally flawed with the manner in which we make our laws, or we do not think them through. And I don't think it would be possible for the BJP, and I say that with a lot of respect, to even gerrymander with the rules.
Congress is likely to jump against the BJP if they try and reverse decisions that they were part of. How important from the perspective of corporate India is it for the labour law and land acquisition acts to be changed?
It's absolutely critical.
Absolutely.
I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is when any major significant laws are being designed, the actual user of that law must be a significant part of the decision making itself. In this case, and I can tell you for a fact because many of us were involved in those discussions, industry pushed very, very hard for this law not to be designed the way it has actually finally come out. And Manish is right, it was going on for many years, but industry's pushback was only in one direction. Please make sure this does not turn anti-investment, it does not turn unfriendly for a business environment. On the one hand, we're saying create more jobs. How do you create more jobs?
Sunil, do you think industry erred in focusing too much on the compensation aspect? Because if you say, let me complete. If you say, under this law, I will have to pay too much to the farmer, you get zero sympathy.
No, I don't think it's about this. Shekhar, this is maybe we're not doing a good enough job communicating this.
This will make it too expensive. On the other hand, if the noise was about how difficult will it make it procedurally, the process.
So actually, the land acquisition is made to increase the time by 4 to 6 years.
So the actually takes away the farmer's freedom to monetize his land.
There is no issue on compensation. So please understand, industries does not want to hire and fire for labor. Industry does not want farmers not to be compensated. That would not be fair, and that would not even be, it would not be sustainable.
So you would rather pay more as long as it gets it done quickly.
You want a clean, quick, and reliable system
without the fear
which
of
is
litigation.
predictable.
So industry actually appreciated and welcomed the rehabilitation part of it. We actually also contested the issue of the time frames that was. It will take 56 months for an acquisition to actually take place, and the processes involved in terms of taking.
56 was very carefully chosen. That is, by the time fully elected government goes into caretaker phase. So we have to wait for another 56 after.
Shekhar, I'll put it this way. I think the 56 months, actually, I think let's not forget, one of the biggest loser is the poor man or lady selling her farm or selling her land. She will not get money for 56 months, and that is if you move as per the law on a day-to-day basis. When you actually look at the sort of slackness which comes in the system, that person is losing out. The industry losing out, because in 5 years' time, your whole project economics goes for a tailspin.
But Shekhar,
so I think the issue of time is very important.
The fundamental reform that you require in lawmaking, and I tried to introduce it when I was in the Information Broadcasting Ministry, is that every law must come with an expiry date. That it has a sunset clause that after 20 years, the law would expire if it is not revalidated by Parliament. Because what you have today, you're talking about the Land Acquisition Act. What about the Indian Penal Code? 1898. What about the Contract Act?
That there is no bipartisanship when it comes to Indian politics. So we can't really expect now to see the Congress play the role of a responsible opposition. We saw on the first day itself, there were adjournments, they didn't allow Parliament to function. Given that, will we now see the Congress do or try to do to the BJP what the BJP did to the Congress over the last 5 years?
I think you're asking the wrong person this question.
No, from your perspective.
No, I think let me go to what I was willing to say. I think two things. On the land policy, because you need to have NOC of 80 or 90%, you can never actually go and acquire land. Even in spite of the market prices, the farmers are unwilling to sell their land.
And they're vested.
So let me now throw a different idea on the table. The problem today is that the farmers will lose their land. That money will get spent in a year and a half. They will be back on the road. There will be law and order situations, so on and so forth. The point I'm making, the idea I'm making to you is, why cannot this be looked as a national policy and a guidance, because it's a state subject land? That agriculture land, concurrent, that the agriculture land should be allowed to lease on long tenure basis. The farmer doesn't end up losing the land. The private sector will come in and start improving quality, improving productivity. We tackle the food security issues, and the Punjab Chief Minister, Shri Prakash Singh Badal, has gone ahead and done this and legislated this 2 years ago. The corporates can go and.
But is it working on the ground?
No, I'm just going to. The lease open-ended, so it's between you and the farmer. The only problem is they have not tom-tommed about this. To me, this was a very radical policy decision taken. Rajasthan government came out with a policy where you could lease land for 15 years and extend it by 15 years. Again, there is, because of the elections and compulsions, everything is lying very low. What I'm trying to say is, and the law also says, that as soon as the lease expires, the land reverts back to the owner, and the tenant has no tenancy rights. I ensure that these things are part of the law, so that after the expiry period, you start getting into litigation and the land is not coming back. Now, to my mind, that is something which needs to be done all over the country. And therefore, we can't say that you cannot go and have land more than 500 acres or 1,000 acres. Having said that, the day this policy comes in place, you will see private sector and corporates moving into the agriculture farming side without taking ownership of the land. And if you take 500,000 acres where you start doing what you want to do, the thousands of farmers and thousands of hectares around that will become your partners in supplying you the product, because the farmers are very good at growing. They don't know how to market the produce, and that's where the private sector comes. So I am giving a different tangent on the land law. If we are going to relook into these things, I think this is something which must go as a guiding principle for the state governments to look at.
In the last part of this program,
to answer your question which you raised to Mr. Mittal, which he of course very wisely refused to answer, I can only quote Mr. Rahul Jaitley to you that disruption is a legitimate parliamentary tactic. So therefore, I will correct that. We are only going to follow, the principles which they have laid down in the opposition.
Shekhar, there's a much bigger problem, I think. Now, just one second. Because if that is the way they function, then then what happens to democracy? Because this is what...
Rahul,
no, Manish,
it's not a joke. It's not a joke.
There's a big problem over there.
That's exactly a serious issue.
Manish,
The leader of opposition in Rajya Sabha said disruption is a legitimate parliamentary tactic.
But this would be a sad statement.
If you have your own conviction,
Rahul,
then an opposition only has such small numbers, you can get parliament to function. Also, I will again repeat to you what the BJP said earlier, but I'm sure Congress party has said this when BJP was in power, that it is the responsibility of the ruling party to make parliament function. Right? The problem with the Congress party was, it never reached out to the BJP. Congress party, who communicated with whom in the BJP in the past 10 years? The Prime Minister did not communicate with anybody. Right? The Congress party sent out either Kamal Nath, wonderful man, but not the head of the party, or I don't know who.
Ghulam Nabi
Azad, to go and talk to who in the BJP. So BJP, I think it was a legitimate reaction on the part of the BJP that look, our head is Mr. Advani now, or Mr. Gadkari now. Your party president should talk to our party president, then we'll make a deal. You can't say, my party president is at another level, even I don't talk to her. Right? Your party president is your party president. So I will send my number 19 guy to talk to your party president. And if you so wish, you can also nominate your number 19 guy. That's not the way you run a parliament.
No, but what
Shekhar, that is incorrect. I can tell you umpteen instances, one second, Alan. I can tell you umpteen instances where the Prime Minister of India invited the leaders of opposition in order to forge a consensus or generate a consensus on a variety of issues. And the last example being, the creation of Telangana. When the creation of Telangana was told, we'll not go into the merits of the decision, but Prime Minister called Mr. L.K. Advani, called Rahul Jaitley and who were the parliamentary leaders in order to talk to them.
That was a very different situation. Everybody wanted Telangana.
But this was still stalled. The Prime Minister had to reach out, and this was the last example.
I want to remind all of us,
there's an incorrect...
one entity which is getting lost here, which is the individual Indian. I think it is a responsibility of all responsible leaders, all politicians, all political parties to ensure that Parliament does function and you are able to take decisions which are in the national interest.
But will your party now bring in the bill to raise, this is linked to the budget, insurance FDI to 49%. I think it's a promise made most often by finance minister in their budget speeches, to take insurance FDI to 49%.
Well,
I'm sure, I'm not 100%, I'm sure even your finance ministers in the past have made this promise.
Well, I can only say, I'm not sure, but I can only say, I can't give you an answer on that.
Well, there's a
really
DIPP note of 2003. There is a DIPP note of 2003 which categorically spells out that insurance should be taken up to 49%.
With support of the Congress party.
I can't answer that.
Get ready to administer a bitter pill. This is what Narendra Modi told the people of India in Goa, saying, brace up for some tough times before the good time comes. But I want to ask Mr. Sriram to begin with, given what happened with the rail fare hike, where the prices of seasonal tickets in Mumbai were rolled back after a hike was announced, which is pretty much what the Congress did for many years, has the BJP given any indication of being different and having the ability to administer the bitter pill which Modi spoke about, India needs, but will they be able to do it given the fact that there are assembly elections around the corner?
I think they will be able to do it, though I think the problem with Indian political system is that there are some state elections or the other every year. So that's a given. But within that, I think the good sentiment which is now being established is that tough decisions are being taken outside the budget. It's like any time of the year they can be taken. I think that's a good direction. You're not then linked to only once a year budget time. You can do it all the time. I don't see a little rollback as a major negative. No. I think that's part of the ball game. It's a part of management system. I would put it this way. I think it's good to be flexible and take the reality. And if instead of moving to 10% you come to 8, what's wrong with that?
No, but it's a question
I think
of
it's moving ahead.
You're being very kind, but it's a question of intent. And the question is, this is exactly what the Congress government did. How are you different? If you've taken a tough decision, then have the courage to stand by it. Why come under political pressure?
This may take a few minutes. I think the first is, the only thing we have to be certain about is not exactly follow what the Congress government did. So I think that's the starting point, otherwise we'll be back.
No, but explain to me, why was the rail price hike reversed?
I've understood your question. Let me just finish the answer. And I think the next is that you are looking at it from the fixed level that you can analyze it from in terms of the same set of principles. We raise prices, a bitter pill is always prices. So let me ask you, those who are coming to office on time, is that a bitter pill not for the people who are coming in late? If implementation of infrastructure projects has to happen on time, and roads have to be built.
I won't allow you, darling, to go off on a tangent. It's a very straight question. It's a question of intent. No, you must come to it first. Allow me to moderate the debate. You must come to that question first.
So I'll answer that straight.
Here is the straight question. You said we need to administer tough pills. You went out and administered a tough pill. Now railway prices need to go up. They're ridiculously low.
Okay, hold on.
Once you do it, then why take it back? You came under pressure from your Maharashtra unit.
I'll answer you. No, I'll answer you.
Answer the question.
Yes, I'll answer it. I'll answer it with the point. You let me finish the remaining part of what I wish to answer. Well, okay, let's start with railways. The last government didn't have the gumption to raise the prices, raise the fares.
We know that.
Hold on. So that means the bitter pill was administered by the government even before the budget came in because it needed to be. Now you're linking it to the railways, the paths in Mumbai's lifeline, the trains, in the suburban trains in Mumbai. Fair enough, there was an outcry there. But the same fare that was implemented here is implemented there. So I mean now your bitter pill cannot be exactly how you would like to see the bitter pill. It will be for the government, and I'm answering that again.
No, but why didn't the government think this through?
Well,
you took
if you wish,
If you wish, would happen on any bitter pill that you administer.
If you wish
just
to
this morning, and tomorrow, Congress representatives were protesting outside Parliament. They're protesting in state headquarters. They're doing to you what you did to them.
No, well, two things. If the Congress party wishes to protest, that is their political right, and they have to look for an agenda to be relevant. But I'm giving you an answer straight. But if you wish to see how the bitter pill is to be there, you have to do exactly what Mr. Modi did. Work your way up and become the Prime Minister of India. You have to give the right of how he wants to administer the bitter pill to the Prime Minister, not to you sitting here.
5 bitter pills, take one of them back. It is his prerogative.
Well, I mean, we don't want to kill the baby either. We don't want to kill the baby either.
Smile on his face, Manish.
You know, there's an inherent chicanery in that argument. And the inherent chicanery in the argument is that people elect the government into office. They expect the government to deliver. And on the basis of that delivery, the fortunes of the political party get impacted. So therefore, when you talked about Achhe Din, and suddenly if you want to tell the people that those Achhe Din are not going to come tomorrow, but they're going to come 3 years down the line or 5 years down the line, I'm sorry, nobody is going to buy that. Number two, insofar as rollback is concerned, well, they are waking up to the realities of governance. The fact is that when you are in government, there are pressures which are working on you all the time. So therefore, you take steps, which you think are in the right direction. There is a backlash, from the political system, and then you try and adjust it. So therefore, they are waking up to that reality, and this is not going to be the last rollback, I can assure you. And number three, on a more serious point, which Mr. Ajay Shriram and Mr. Ashok Lahiri had raised, with regard to what is the health of our economy. The reason I say that is because you had the Prime Minister in Goa talking about empty coffers. You had the former Finance Minister then address a press conference and lay out exactly as to what has happened over the last 10 years and also emphasize as to what the economic or the fiscal situation is. I would welcome, I'll ask Nalin to tell the Finance Minister, let him come out with a white paper on what the health of the Indian economy is.
The whole point
therefore we would know as to where does the truth lie.
No, Dr. Lahiri, the whole point, I'm coming back to Nalin. The whole point of Narendra Modi having a simple majority is that he's supposed to be immune to such pressure, that he has the majority to continue in Parliament, take tough decisions, and that's why corporate India is so excited. That's where they believe investor confidence will come back from. Do you believe that there's a larger message? When you take a tough decision, roll it back, it makes people wary whether you'll have the courage to stick to your tough decision.
I think I shouldn't be seen as a protagonist of the government, but I must congratulate the government for the railway fares. For 10 years, railway fares were not revised. They did only some jugglery with classification of freight. There were 30 classes, they improved it, fast trains, put a surcharge and that kind of thing. This is the first time it has been done. We know passenger fares are so low that passenger section of Indian Railways incurs a loss of about 15,000 crore. So 14.6 and freight has been raised less. Now mind you, the increase in suburban fares Suburban fare, suburban...
No, it's a question of
passenger
principle as far as I'm concerned.
Principle is-
You take a decision, you roll it back because there's pressure, which is what the Congress did as well.
See, I have a lot of respect for political people. They have a judgment about what can be sold. So what has happened is that suburban fares were increased much more than 14.5. The government has cleverly rolled it back to 14.5. Not that suburban fares have not gone up. It have gone up, but they haven't been able to push through the massive increase that was needed. And I still believe suburban fares have...
But Mr. Munjal, do you see that as an area of concern? That decisions get taken, tough decisions, and then get reversed?
So I think, let me just come at this from a slightly different angle.
Yes.
I think what the new government needs to do is continue and grow the good policies that were implemented by the previous government. They don't have to be thrown out of the window just because they were by the previous government. Fix those which were not working well, and we've given clear examples of the Land Act and the Companies Act and the whole host of them. At the same time, implement brand new ones which have not been touched for a long time. We've talked of the railway fare now. There's labor policy waiting out there for a long time. There's discussion and debate going on. I think what has happened is, as you said, public expectation has got raised dramatically in a very short time. That also carries a risk. You want to see things happen tomorrow. And public opinion also has a habit of turning negative if it doesn't see delivery very quickly. Which is why I said, I think the government also needs to play a balancing act. Of course, they have to do stuff for the long term, but they also have to do a few things which show some results right away.
The expectations are immense. What remains to be seen is to what extent are team Modi and Jaitley able to deliver on those expectations. The Aam Aadmi, corporate India, domestic and foreign investors are all watching. Thank you all very much for joining us on this special broadcast. We'll of course keep tracking the budget news and updates. Continue when we come back on the other side of a quick break. Thank you.